1. Salò, or the 120 Days of Sodom. Let me tell you about a film that many people still struggle to talk about, not just because of what it shows, but because of what it means. The film is called Salò, or the 120 Days of Sodom. It was directed by the Italian filmmaker Pier Paolo Pasolini, and when it was released in 1975, it immediately became one of the most controversial films in cinematic history. But Pasolini never intended this film to be simple entertainment. To him, it was something else. A statement. A political statement about power. The story was loosely inspired by the writings of the Marquis de Sade, but Pasolini made a crucial change. Instead of setting the story in the 18th century, he moved it to the final period of World War II, a time when fascist power still controlled parts of Italy. In the film, 4 extremely powerful men gather in a secluded villa. Each one represents a pillar of authority: politics, military power, religion, and the justice system. On the surface, they are leaders. But inside the story, they represent something darker. A system where power becomes absolute. And when power becomes absolute, people stop seeing others as human beings. Instead, they see objects. The 4 men abduct 18 teenagers and bring them into their isolated world. Inside the villa, normal laws no longer exist. The men create their own rules. And in that world, the young people are no longer individuals. They are treated as possessions. Pasolini pushed the story to disturbing extremes. But he wasn't doing it simply to shock the audience. He was illustrating something he believed deeply. That absolute power inevitably corrupts the way people see humanity. But Pasolini's message went even further. He believed modern society was beginning to develop a different kind of control, not through dictatorship alone, but through consumer culture. In his view, modern capitalism had started to turn people into products. Bodies could be consumed, identities could be shaped, and individuality could slowly disappear. In the film, the abuse of the body becomes a metaphor, a symbol of how systems of power can dominate both the physical and the psychological parts of human life. Even the structure of the film was carefully designed. Pasolini divided the story into chapters inspired by Dante's Divine Comedy. Each section represents a deeper descent into a man-made version of hell. Not a supernatural hell, but one created entirely by human power. When the film was released, reactions were immediate and intense. Many countries banned it for decades. Some governments refused to allow it to be screened at all. But the controversy didn't end there. Just weeks before the film's official premiere, Pasolini was murdered under mysterious circumstances. His death has remained one of the most debated cases in modern Italian history. And that tragic ending gave the film an even darker legacy. Because Salò now feels like Pasolini's final warning. A warning that when power becomes concentrated in the hands of a few, and when people begin to treat others as objects rather than human beings, the distance between civilization and cruelty becomes dangerously small. Today, many critics consider Salò a masterpiece of psychological and social commentary. But even they admit something important. This is not a film designed to be liked. It is a film designed to be remembered. Two, the house that Jack built. Let me tell you about a film that made people physically walk out of the theater. Not because it was boring, but because it forced the audience to sit inside the mind of someone deeply disturbing. The film is called The House That Jack Built. It was directed by Lars von Trier, one of the most controversial filmmakers in modern cinema. When the movie premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in 2018, something unusual happened. More than 100 people stood up and left the screening before it was finished. But the reason wasn't simply violence. It was the idea behind the violence. The story follows a man named Jack. At first glance, Jack seems ordinary, calm, quiet, intelligent, but inside his mind, everything operates under a completely different logic. Jack doesn't think of his actions as crimes. He calls them incidents. Each one, in his mind, is part of something bigger, a project, an artistic construction. Jack believes he is building a masterpiece, not with paint, not with stone, but with carefully staged acts that he believes reveal something profound about human nature. In his philosophy, true artists must ignore moral boundaries. If art is meant to reach perfection, then nothing should stand in the way. That idea is what makes the film so uncomfortable, because many critics noticed that Jack seems to function as a reflection of Lars von Trier himself, an artist who constantly pushes boundaries even when audiences accuse him of going too far. The structure of the film is also unusual. The story is divided into 5 chapters, each representing a different episode in Jack's life. Throughout these chapters, Jack speaks with a mysterious figure named Verge. Verge acts almost like a guide. He questions Jack, challenges him, and slowly it becomes clear that this character mirrors Virgil, the guide in Dante's Divine Comedy, which means the film is quietly leading the audience toward a familiar destination: hell. Not a supernatural one, but a psychological one. As the film progresses, it becomes clear that Jack suffers from extreme narcissism. He sees himself as exceptional, above ordinary morality. But at the same time, he struggles with something fundamental. He lacks emotional connection. At one point in the film, Jack practices facial expressions in a mirror, not because he feels emotion, but because he wants to simulate it, like an actor trying to learn how a normal human being behaves. This emotional emptiness is what makes the character so unsettling. And it's one of the reasons so many viewers walked out at Cannes. But the reaction to the film has always been divided. Some critics see it as a dark satire about the role of the artist. Others see it as an example of artistic arrogance, a film that crosses ethical boundaries in the name of creativity. But whether people admire it or reject it, most agree on one thing. This is not a film designed to comfort an audience. It is a film designed to confront them. And sometimes, the most disturbing part of a story isn't the violence itself. It's the idea that someone might believe it's beautiful. 3. Martyrs. Let me tell you about a film that many horror fans describe as a test. Not a test of courage, but a test of endurance. The film is called Martyrs. Released in 2008, it quickly became one of the most controversial films in modern horror. But Martyrs isn't controversial for the same reasons as most extreme films. Because behind the violence, there's a very unsettling idea. The movie emerged from a movement known as New French Extremity, a wave of films that pushed cinema into uncomfortable territory. Not just visually, but philosophically. At first, Martyrs looks like a revenge story, a character with a traumatic past, a search for justice. But halfway through the film, the story changes completely. The revenge narrative fades away, and something much stranger begins to emerge. A secret group, people who believe in a very specific theory about human suffering. They believe that extreme pain can unlock something inside the human mind, something beyond the limits of the body. In their philosophy, when suffering reaches its absolute limit, the mind may enter a transcendent state, a state where a person might glimpse what lies beyond death. To them, this isn't cruelty, it's research. an attempt to answer one of humanity's oldest questions. What happens after we die? The film is structured in two very distinct halves. The first half is chaotic and emotional, driven by anger and revenge. But the second half becomes cold, controlled, almost clinical. And that shift is what makes the film so disturbing. Because the audience slowly realizes that the violence is not random. It's systematic, designed to push someone to the edge of human endurance. Many critics began asking an uncomfortable question. Can a philosophical idea ever justify this level of suffering? Is the search for truth worth that cost? The film builds toward one of the most unsettling endings in horror cinema. The main character finally reaches the state the group has been trying to achieve. She sees something, a revelation, an answer about what lies beyond death. But the audience never hears it. Only one person learns the truth. A whisper is exchanged, and then silence. The secret stays hidden, and that silence is what makes Martyrs linger in the mind. Because the film refuses to tell you the answer. Instead, it leaves you with a question. If someone truly discovered what waits after death, would humanity actually want to know? Today, Martyrs is often described as a landmark in extreme horror, not because it's designed to entertain, but because it forces the audience to confront something deeper: our fear of suffering, our curiosity about death, and the unsettling possibility that some people might sacrifice anything to understand it. 3 movies, 3 completely different stories. But the reason they were banned wasn't just the shocking scenes. It was the ideas behind them. Ideas that made people uncomfortable. Ideas that made society ask questions it didn't want to answer. So here's something I'm curious about. What do you think is more dangerous? A movie filled with violent imagery, or a movie that makes people start thinking about ideas that maybe should never exist? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you enjoy exploring the darker side of cinema, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next story.